First contact, first blood. The vast command deck of the Valkyrie warship Inevitable Conquest thrummed with the harmonious precision of a machine that had been perfected over millennia. Admiral Xorak stood motionless, his four upper limbs clasped behind his back, secondary eyes scanning multiple holographic displays while his primary vision focused on the small blue-green world rotating slowly in the main projection field. "Another primitive world for the glory of the Imperium," commented Sub-Commander Vrel, her voice carrying the distinctive metallic resonance of the Valkyrie elite caste. "Initial scans suggest minimal resistance capability. Their most advanced weapons are crude nuclear devices and chemical propellants." Thorak's facial plates shifted in what the lesser species would interpret as a smile, though it contained no warmth, only the cold calculation of a predator assessing easy prey. The Valkyrie Imperium had conquered over 300 worlds in the last 5 centuries alone. Their method was as efficient as it was predictable. Identify, evaluate, overwhelm, subjugate. No species had ever presented more than a token resistance once the full might of a Valkyrie battle fleet arrived in their system. "Prepare the standard first contact protocol," Xorak ordered. "A single destroyer should be sufficient for the initial demonstration of force. Target their largest military installation and their planetary leadership center. Once they witness our technological superiority, they will surrender as all others have." The destroyer's swift dominance detached from the main fleet, its quantum engines flaring as it accelerated toward Earth. The vessel was a marvel of Valkyrie engineering, a perfect killing machine designed to instill hopelessness in primitive species who still believed they had a chance against the inevitable tide of conquest. Commander Kayla Chen stood in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, her dark eyes fixed on the massive display showing the approaching alien vessel. At 42, she had survived 3 major conflicts on Earth and carried the physical and mental scars of each. Now she faced something entirely different, an extraterrestrial threat that humanity had theorized about but never truly prepared for. "All tracking systems confirm it's on an approach vector to Washington, D.C., reported Lieutenant James Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across the quantum interface. "Their technology is. It's like nothing we've ever seen. Energy readings are off the charts." Chen's expression remained impassive, but her mind raced through possibilities with the precision of a supercomputer. 6 months ago, when the first alien signals had been detected, most of the world's governments had panicked. Some had wanted immediate surrender, others advocated for a first strike with nuclear weapons. It had taken every ounce of Chen's considerable influence to convince the United Earth Defense Council to try a different approach. "Is the Mockingbird network in position?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the tension coiling inside her. "Yes, Commander. Dr. Reed's systems are fully operational and awaiting your command." Chen allowed herself the slightest of smiles. "Then let's give our visitors a proper Earth welcome." The swift dominance entered Earth's atmosphere with the arrogant confidence of a predator that had never known failure. Its advanced sensors detected the primitive electromagnetic communications of the humans, their radar systems, and their nuclear weapons, all laughably inadequate against Valkyrie technology. "Weapons locked on primary target," reported the weapons officer. "Washington, D.C. Leadership Complex identified." The destroyer's main cannon began charging, a process that would take 30 seconds before unleashing destruction that would level the human capital city and demonstrate the futility of resistance. What happened next would change the course of Valkyrie history forever. The destroyer's sensors suddenly detected hundreds, then thousands, of small objects rising from Earth's surface and from hidden orbital positions. Before the Valkyrie commander could react, the objects swarmed the vessel, attaching themselves to its hull. "Unidentified devices attaching to outer hull," the sensor officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "They appear to be primitive, mechanical rather than energy-based." The commander's dismissal of the threat died in his throat as the first device detonated, not with a conventional explosion, but with a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that targeted the destroyer's shield generators. The second wave of devices activated in perfect synchronization, each one exploiting a different vulnerability in Velturi design that the humans should have had no knowledge of. Shields failing, weapon systems offline. The panic in the crew's voices was something never before heard on a Velturi warship. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Commander Chen watched the data stream in with grim satisfaction. Dr. Reed's Mockingbird devices are performing exactly as designed, she commented. They're adapting to the alien technology and exploiting weaknesses faster than the enemy can compensate. But how? Rodriguez asked, voicing the question that had been on everyone's mind. We've never encountered this species before. How could Reed's systems know their vulnerabilities? Chen's eyes never left the display. Because Marcus Reed is the most brilliant mind humanity has ever produced. He didn't try to predict specific alien technology. He created a system that could analyze, learn, and adapt faster than any conventional defense. The Mockingbirds aren't just weapons. They're an autonomous learning network. On the screen, the Velturi destroyer began to list in the upper atmosphere, its symmetrical form now marred by multiple breaches and failing systems. No distress call was transmitted. The Velturi hadn't considered the possibility of needing to request assistance against a primitive species. Prepare boarding teams, Chen ordered. I want that ship captured intact if possible. Every piece of their technology we can salvage gives us an advantage for what comes next. What comes next? Rodriguez asked, though he already knew the answer. Chen's expression hardened. They'll send more ships. Many more. And when they do, we need to be ready. Admiral Xorak stared at the empty space in the holographic display where the swift dominance should have been. The destroyer's quantum signature had simply vanished, and no communication had been received since it entered Earth's atmosphere. Impossible, he whispered, the word foreign on his tongue. In 3 centuries of military service, Xorak had never lost a vessel to a pre-spacefaring species. Launch immediate reconnaissance drones. I want visual confirmation of the destroyer's destruction. When the drone's images reached the command ship, the atmosphere on the bridge shifted from confusion to rage. The swift dominance lay partially dismantled in a massive facility that the humans had apparently constructed in secret. Teams of tiny figures swarmed over the vessel like insects, methodically removing components and transporting them deeper into the facility. They're studying our technology, Sub-Commander Varel observed, her voice hollow with disbelief. They disabled one of our destroyers and are now dissecting it. Xorak's facial plates contracted in fury. Prepare the battle fleet. This primitive species requires a lesson in the consequences of defiance. Dr. Marcus Reed's laboratory beneath the Atlantic Ocean was a cacophony of activity as teams of scientists worked frantically to integrate the salvaged alien technology with Earth's defensive systems. At 56, Reed's once dark hair had long since turned gray, but his mind remained the sharpest weapon in humanity's arsenal. The Velturi propulsion system operates on quantum principles we've only theorized about, he explained to Commander Chen, who had arrived for a personal briefing. But their computational systems are surprisingly vulnerable to certain types of electronic warfare. They'd clearly never faced an adversary who could adapt quickly enough to exploit these weaknesses. Chen studied the holographic representation of the alien vessel's systems. How long before you can replicate their shield technology? Reed's expression was grim but determined. That's the problem. We can't replicate it with our current manufacturing capabilities. But his eyes lit up with the fire of inspiration. We don't need to replicate it. We can subvert it. He manipulated the hologram, highlighting specific nodes in the alien shield matrix. The Mockingbird network was just the beginning. What I'm proposing now is the swarm defense system. Instead of trying to match their technology conventionally, we deploy millions of microsatellites, each carrying a modified version of the Mockingbird Eye. Together, they form a distributed intelligence that can analyze, adapt, and counter Velturi technology in real time. Chen considered the proposal. How quickly can you deploy this system? The first generation is already in production. We can have basic coverage of Earth's orbital space within 72 hours. Reed hesitated. But Kayla, you need to understand. This is a defensive measure. It might buy us time, but it won't win the war. Winning isn't about matching their strength, Chen replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many conflicts. It's about making the cost of victory too high for them to accept. The Velturi War Council convened in the sacred chambers of the inevitable conquest, a gathering that occurred only when facing a threat worthy of collective consideration. 12 of the Imperium's highest-ranking admirals formed a circle around the central projection field, where images of Earth and its defensive preparations rotated slowly. This species calls themselves humans, Thorak informed the Council. Initial assessment categorized them as a standard pre-spacefaring civilization, but their response to our first contact protocol was unprecedented. The eldest admiral, Morax, leaned forward, his ancient facial plates creased with skepticism. One destroyer lost to primitive trickery does not constitute a threat to the Imperium. Thorak. Our reconnaissance reveals they have already begun integrating our technology with their own. Thorak countered. More concerning is the speed of their adaptation. Analysis of their global communications suggests they had prepared defensive measures specifically designed to counter technologies they had never encountered. Impossible, another admiral dismissed. No species can develop countermeasures without prior exposure. Yet these humans have done exactly that, Thorak insisted. Moreover, they seem to lack the fear response that typically facilitates conquest. Instead of panicking at our arrival, they executed a coordinated defense strategy that suggests long-term planning. The projection shifted to show massive human facilities, where production of unusual devices was underway at a frantic pace. Satellite imagery revealed millions of small objects being launched into orbital configurations around their planet. I propose we deploy the full battle fleet, Thorak concluded, not just to subjugate this world, but to make an example of it. The humans represent a type of defiance we have not encountered before, one that could spread dangerous ideas to our subject worlds if left unchecked. Morax considered this, then nodded slowly. Approved. Deploy all available forces. This Earth shall become a testament to the consequences of defying the Velturi Imperium. In the 6 weeks following the destruction of the Velturi destroyer, Earth transformed. Ancient rivalries and conflicts were set aside as humanity united against an existential threat. Military facilities operated around the clock, producing the components for Reed's swarm defense system. Orbital platforms that had once been research stations or commercial satellites were converted into defensive positions. Commander Chen stood before the United Earth Defense Council, her uniform crisp despite having worked for 72 hours straight. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a massive fleet approaching the solar system, she reported. Based on their trajectory and velocity, they will reach Earth orbit in approximately 10 days. What are our chances? Asked the council chairwoman, her face lined with the weight of responsibility for humanity's survival. Chen didn't sugarcoat her assessment. Conventional military doctrine would say 0. The approaching fleet represents technological superiority and firepower that we cannot match directly. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. However, Chen continued, a fierce determination in her eyes, we are not fighting a conventional war. Dr. Reed's swarm defense is now fully operational. Our boarding teams recovered enough technology from the destroyed destroyer to give us insights into Velturi tactical systems. And most importantly, she paused, making eye contact with each council member. We have something the Velturi have never faced in all their centuries of conquest. And what is that, Commander? The chairwoman asked. Chen's expression hardened, embodying the indomitable will that would soon become legendary throughout the galaxy. The human capacity to defy impossible odds. They believe they know war because they've only faced species who surrendered when defeat seemed inevitable. They're about to discover what happens when they face an enemy who refuses to accept defeat under any circumstances. She activated a holographic display showing Earth surrounded by millions of tiny points of light. The Swarm Defense System, now the largest distributed intelligence ever created. The Velturi believe this battle will be routine, just another primitive species to add to their empire. We're about to show them what real destruction looks like. Defiance beyond reason. The vast Velturi armada emerged from quantum space at the edge of Earth's solar system, a sight meant to extinguish hope in the hearts of the soon-to-be-conquered. Over 300 warships arranged in perfect formation, a testament to millennia of unopposed military dominance. At their center, the colossal dreadnought Imperiums will dwarf all other vessels, its planet-killing main cannon capable of rendering Earth's surface uninhabitable with a single discharge. Admiral Xorak surveyed the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Begin standard approach vector. Maintain unified formation until we reach the fourth planet's orbit, then deploy into conquest configuration. The fleet moved with ominous precision, a predator confident in its superiority. Preliminary scans showed human activity throughout their system, primitive orbital structures, defensive positions around their moon, and curious swarms of small objects that the Velturi systems classified as debris or primitive satellites. Curious, muttered Sub-Commander Varel, studying the sensor readings. They've made no attempt to hide their defensive preparations, yet their technology remains insufficient to pose any threat. Tablets. Facial plates shifted in a gesture of dismissal. A psychological tactic, perhaps. Some species display aggression when cornered, even when resistance is futile. It changes nothing. As the Armada passed the orbit of Mars, the first anomalies appeared in the sensor data. The swarms of small objects began moving in coordinated patterns, adjusting their positions in response to the fleet's approach. Admiral, the sensor officer reported, confusion evident in his tone, the human devices are forming into networks. They appear to be establishing communication relays between them. Xorak gave the equivalent of a shrug. Primitive observation systems. They pose no threat to our shields. The officer hesitated. Sir, there are millions of them. And they're changing. In the Atlantic Command Center, Dr. Marcus Reed watched as his creation came fully online. The Swarm Defense Network, billions of microsatellites each no larger than a human hand, represented humanity's greatest technological achievement. But its true power lay not in individual units but in their collective intelligence. Swarm consciousness has reached critical threshold. Reeve announced, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The network is now fully autonomous and learning at an exponential rate. Commander Chen stood beside him, watching as holographic displays showed the swarm adapting to the approaching Velturi fleet. How long until they're in weapons range? Approximately 43 minutes, Reed replied. But the swarm isn't waiting. On the displays, the microsatellites began accelerating toward the alien fleet, not in a direct assault, but in a complex three-dimensional pattern that seemed chaotic until viewed from multiple angles. Then the strategy became clear. They were forming a neural network in space, creating a computational mesh around the entire fleet. What are they doing? Asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been promoted to Chen's executive officer following his performance during the first encounter. Reed's eyes gleamed with pride and wonder. Exactly what they were designed to do. Adapt. The swarm is analyzing every aspect of Velturi technology in real time, identifying vulnerabilities faster than the aliens can recognize they're being scanned. Aboard the Imperium's Will, alarms began to sound as more sophisticated analysis revealed the true nature of the human swarm devices. Admiral, these are not debris or simple satellites, the sensor officer reported urgently. They're autonomous combat units with advanced scanning capabilities. They're analyzing our shield frequencies, weapon systems, everything. Xorak's dismissive attitude vanished instantly. Raise all shields to maximum. Target those devices and fire at will. The Velturi fleet's weapon systems came alive, firing energy beams, and quantum torpedoes at the approaching swarm. Some of the microsatellites were destroyed, but for each one eliminated, 100 others adapted their approach patterns, becoming harder to target. Then, in a maneuver that defied conventional space combat doctrine, the swarm suddenly split into thousands of smaller formations, each targeting a specific vulnerability on different Valkyrie vessels. Some attached themselves to shield generators, others to weapon systems, still others to communication arrays. What is happening? Sorak demanded as reports of systems failures began flooding in from across the fleet. They're adapting to our countermeasures in real time, the tactical officer replied, horror in his voice. Each time we adjust our shields or weapons, they change their attack pattern. It's as if they're learning with each engagement. On the outer edges of the fleet, smaller Valkyrie vessels began to drift, their systems compromised by the swarm's electronic warfare. The larger ships fared better, their redundant systems able to compensate temporarily, but even they showed signs of struggling against the unprecedented assault. Across Earth's solar system, stealth vessels that had been hiding in the shadow of planets and moons activated their engines. These ships, small, fast, and carrying elite boarding teams, had been positioned weeks earlier in anticipation of this moment. While the swarm defense network occupied the Valkyrie fleet's attention and defensive systems, these vessels approached from blind spots created by the electronic warfare. Lieutenant Sofia Martinez commanded one such vessel approaching the Valkyrie communications hub near the rear of their formation. At 34, she had spent half her life as a Special Forces operative, but nothing had prepared her for the mission she now undertook. Approaching target, she informed her team of 12 operators. Swarm units have created a sensor blind spot on their ventral shield array. We'll have exactly 47 seconds to attach and cut through. The stealth vessel silently maneuvered to the designated position, its advanced cloaking system, enhanced with salvaged Valkyrie technology, rendering it nearly invisible. As they approached the massive alien vessel, Martinez could see the chaos unfolding across the fleet. The perfectly organized formation had dissolved as individual ships tried to combat the swarm attacks. Attach points secured, reported her second-in-command. Cutting charges in place. Martinez nodded grimly. Remember, our objective is their quantum communication hub. We take it intact, and we cripple their ability to coordinate the fleet. The charges detonated with surgical precision, creating an opening in the Valkyrie vessel's hull without triggering major alarms. The boarding team, clad in advanced combat suits, entered the alien ship with practiced efficiency. Similar scenes played out across the Valkyrie fleet as dozens of human strike teams infiltrated key vessels, targeting command systems, weapons controls, and engines. It was a strategy born of desperate innovation. Unable to match the aliens' firepower, humanity had opted to attack from within. Admiral Sorak watched in mounting horror as his perfect battle fleet descended into chaos. The human swarm had disrupted their formation, isolated individual vessels, and created vulnerabilities that should never have existed in superior Valkyrie technology. Worse, reports now indicated boarding actions on multiple ships, including several command vessels. This is unprecedented, Sub-Commander Vrel stated, no longer able to hide or shock. No species has ever penetrated a Valkyrie battle fleet, let alone coordinated an attack of this magnitude. Kellerek's facial plates contracted in fury. Enough. Prepare the dreadnought's main cannon. We will eradicate this infestation at its source. The massive planet-killer weapon began its charging sequence, drawing energy from the dreadnought's quantum core. It would take 7 minutes to reach full capacity, more than enough time to end the human resistance permanently. What Sorak didn't know was that this action had been anticipated. Deep within the dreadnought, a human strike team led by Commander Chen herself had already reached the weapons control systems. Exactly as predicted, Chen murmured as she worked to override the alien technology. Dr. Reed's analysis of Valkyrie psychology had suggested they would resort to their ultimate weapon when faced with unexpected resistance. "Rodriguez, are you in position?" "Affirmative, Commander," came the response through her secure communication implant. Strike teams have secured communication hubs on 17 vessels. The Velturi fleet is now operating on isolated tactical networks only. Chen smiled grimly as she completed the final override sequence on the planet killer weapon. Perfect. Execute Phase 3. Throughout the solar system, a new development unfolded, one that shocked even the humans monitoring the battle. From the outer planets, vessels of unknown design emerged from hiding. These ships, bearing markings of different alien civilizations, moved to engage the Velturi fleet from unexpected vectors. "We're receiving transmissions from the unknown vessels," reported a communications officer in the Atlantic Command Center. "They're identifying themselves as the Liberation Coalition, species that were previously conquered by the Velturi." Dr. Reed stared at the data in amazement. "Our broadcasts about resistance spread further than we realized. We've inspired others to rise up." The newcomers weren't numerous, perhaps 40 vessels in total, but their arrival shattered any remaining Velturi cohesion. Attacked from within by boarding teams, from without by previously subjugated species, and throughout by the ever-adapting swarm, the mighty armada began to fracture into isolated groups, fighting for survival rather than conquest. Aboard the Imperium's Will, Admiral Xorak received the final blow to his military career and the Velturi's unchallenged dominance. The planet killer weapon, fully charged and targeted at Earth, suddenly redirected its targeting systems. Before the Admiral could react, the weapon discharged, not at Earth, but at empty space millions of kilometers away. What happened? He roared as the dreadnought's primary weapon vented its energy harmlessly into the void. The weapon controls were overridden, a technician reported, panic evident in his voice. "And sir, we're receiving a transmission from the weapon control chamber. It's a human." Commander Chen's face appeared on the main display, her expression one of grim satisfaction. "Admiral Xorak, this is Commander Kayla Chen of Earth. Your fleet is compromised, your weapons disabled, and your conquered subjects are in open rebellion. You have two choices, withdrawal or annihilation." Xorak's facial plates contorted in rage. "This is impossible. You are a primitive species. You cannot defeat the Velturi Imperium." Chen's expression didn't change. "Look around you, Admiral. The impossible is happening. The age of Velturi dominance is over." As if to emphasize her point, explosions rippled through several key Velturi vessels as their engines overloaded, the result of precise sabotage by human boarding teams. The once mighty armada was now a scattered collection of damaged ships, many drifting powerless in space. The Battle of Earth, as it would later be known throughout the galaxy, ended not with the planet's conquest, but with the unthinkable, a Velturi retreat. The surviving vessels, less than half their original number, limped back toward the edge of the solar system, pursued by the relentless swarm and the newly emboldened ships of the Liberation Coalition. In the aftermath, as humanity began to process what they had accomplished, a new galactic reality emerged. The Velturi Imperium, while not destroyed, had been irrevocably weakened. Subject worlds across dozens of star systems rose in rebellion, inspired by Earth's impossible victory. Commander Chen stood in the United Earth Defense Council chamber, now joined by representatives of 7 formerly subjugated species who had come to forge alliances with the humans who had done the impossible. "We did more than save our world," Chen told the assembled leaders. "We created a new paradigm for interstellar civilization, one based not on conquest, but on cooperation and mutual defense." Dr. Reed, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. "The Swarm Defense Network can be adapted to protect any world that wishes to join our alliance. Together, we can ensure that no species ever again faces the threat of extinction at the hands of conquerors." As the council session concluded, Chen found herself looking at an image of Earth from space, now surrounded by the protective network that had saved humanity. The Velturi had thought they knew war, a careful, calculated exercise in overwhelming force against predictable resistance. Humanity had shown them a different kind of conflict altogether, adaptive, innovative, and fueled by an unbreakable will to survive. They had thought their conquest would be routine, until humans showed them what real destruction looked like. And in doing so, humanity had not just saved itself, but changed the course of galactic history forever. The stars, once threatening in their vastness, now beckoned with possibility. Humanity had earned its place among them, not through conquest, but through courage, innovation, and an indomitable spirit that would soon become legendary across the cosmos.